So welcome to Sellics Thursday Live, episode number 11. My name is Thomas Ropel. I am the CMO of Sellics, and I'm incredibly happy to be the host of your today's session around e-commerce and around e-commerce multi-channel strategy. Before I just quickly introduce our special guest today, I will just quickly double check with our tech team if there is any way that we can actually figure out the YouTube live streaming tech issue, which we seem to have here. So let me just quickly do this, and then we will continue with this. So there we go. Let me just post this, and our tech team can work in parallel. And then we will continue already with our live show. So yes, let's start. So yeah, we have today the conversation around e-commerce and around multi-channel and e-commerce. It's one of the big topics in the industry. For those of you that followed in the last few weeks, the different STL, Sellics Thursday Live episodes, we talked in the beginning a lot about COVID-19, and already back in the days, we talked about how important it is to diversify in this important time. Then we moved a little bit the focus more to advertising related topics. So also in the last two episodes, we talked about Google and Amazon. We talked about DSP and broader advertising ecosystem around Amazon. So we kind of like touched a little bit on some of the topics here and there. But what we haven't had done yet properly is to really go deeper into the topic of what is really a multi-channel strategy within e-commerce. How does it work? What should people think of? What are kind of like the strengths and the weaknesses of different channels. And this is pretty much what we'll try to really double down and focus on today. And I'm incredibly happy that we have a special guest here today. The special guest is probably one of the leading experts on this topic around the world. And yeah, so Mudit, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. I'm very excited to be here.
Yes, and so are we. And just for those of you, just some brief words from my side around Mudit. So Mudit is the global head of e-commerce at Wavemaker. That is essentially part of Group M, and Group M is essentially part of WPP. I think most of you will be aware about what WPP is, but it's basically the largest advertiser in the world. But without further ado, probably Mudit, just a few words from your side.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm very privileged to be part of WPP and at Wavemaker. And I guess my role on a day-to-day basis is being sort of an advisor to some of our largest clients that are trying to navigate the world of e-commerce more holistically, whether that is Amazon or direct-to-consumer or e-retail and increasingly social commerce as well. And being part of Group M and the media buying side of things, my day-to-day involves quite a bit of how we invest paid media dollars behind the fact that retailers are slowly becoming media owners. And also media owners are becoming retailers. So that's another interesting part of it. But more and more, I'm finding that we are being asked to provide strategic direction on things like, what is the role of Amazon for me? Or should I really go into social commerce? Or, how do I really figure out a way to make money on these different platforms? And I kind of oversee that globally. So I've spent a lot of time in North America. And before COVID, I was traveling quite a bit. Thankfully, I now get to do that from my room. And I've been kind of in this role now for about 10 years. And before that, I had a few other roles at WPP agencies. So it's been a really interesting few years. And I think every year, this has been the most interesting year to be in e-commerce. But I think 2020 for all of us is definitely the most interesting year to be in e-commerce. So yeah, that's a little bit about my role, and yeah, happy to get stuck in.
Fantastic, Mudit. Yeah, I think it's as I say, it's probably one of the most exciting years to be in e-commerce. And personally, I really think I couldn't agree more. It's there's already always the joke when people have like this picture where you see what happened in 2010, 11, 12, and there's like always one book in the library, and then you come to 2020 and you have volume 1, volume 2, volume 3, right?
Yep.
Because this year just 5 months passed by, but people I think have probably realized that already more happened than in other decades, right? Happened.
Yep.
And this affects e-commerce in a big way. So we will talk a lot about what actually the implications are. And before we get started and go much deeper into the topic of today, just some housekeeping. So this is a live session, right? So this also when you kind of like, notice that there are any issues or challenges, please always bear with us. It's a live show. So that's why we always kind of like try to ensure that we can fix also things on time. But it also means that we really hope for your engagement. So you can use the chat, you can use the Q&A, both work, right? So just kind of like put in any questions during the session, put in any questions within the chat window. We will monitor them regularly and we'll try to come back on your questions live in the show or at the end, right? So we always have some time blocked at the end, but we also will ensure that all questions, if possible, will be addressed. And if not, we will follow up to everyone individually if we run out of time. So that's just some housekeeping, but now let's move directly into the topic. And yes, so Mudit, I think we have quite a diverse audience here today. So we have big brands, we have smaller brands. I think the main thing that everyone has in common is that they're basically already active on Amazon. So everyone knows Amazon is a big channel, right? So I don't think we kind of like need to talk so much about that. But I think what we would like to understand before we go deeper into different strategies, how would you structure basically the e-commerce channel space, right? So how would you think about different channels? When we talk about channels, what do we really talk about?
Yeah, so before going into each of the channels, a really useful way to architect them, because I know that as soon as I finish listing all of them, there'll be a few more that have emerged because there's so many ways to come into it. A really useful way to think about it is where they are on the spectrum of vertical integration. So if you are a business that owns all of its production, all of its manufacturing, all of its distribution, and are largely retailing through your brand.com, that's fully vertically integrated. And on the other extreme, you have mostly sort of CPG type brands who just own the manufacturing but not the distribution. That's the other extreme. Within that, going from most integrated to least integrated, the most integrated is obviously DTC. You have full control of everything, every aspect of the consumer experience. You can control pricing, you can control merchandising, you can control shipment options, you can control how people pay for your product. So that's DTC. One level removed from that is the emerging area, which is social commerce. And I think we'll get into social commerce quite a bit. Within social commerce, you can control most things, but you can't control the final consumer experience, because you can't have a Facebook ad that doesn't fit kind of a Facebook box or something. Or if we look at Asia and within WeChat, you can do almost anything. You can control a lot of the back end stuff, but you can't control all of the front end. Then we get into marketplaces. Within marketplaces, and I leave Amazon out of this, but I'm thinking more of Lazada, of eBay, of the pure marketplaces where you have a little bit more control, but you're also now starting to give up control because other people are playing there as well. They can also affect pricing. They can affect the way that your product's represented. Then you get into Amazon, which I think is a marketplace where you have more control. You're not completely left to your own devices. And as much as it's surprising to think of what that looks like, at least you have a vendor central or a seller central, which gives you some control over what you do. Obviously, the big problem is you give up control of pricing and you give up control of distribution, unless you're going with like your own third-party fulfilled thing. But if you're going with Amazon retail, you even give up that fulfillment experience. And then there's e-retail. So that's your whole, traditional retail, the way we think about it from 30 years ago, where I manufacture something and I give it to Tesco or Carrefour or Kaufland to retail, where I basically have control of what the product looks like, and I can give some suggestion as to what the pricing should be. So that's kind of the channel landscape. Now, obviously, there are going to be entities that merge across different things, but that's, I think, just a useful way of thinking about it. But what I will say is, as more channels emerge, think of them along that line of vertical integration where they are. So don't think of them as one more, but think of them on where they are on the spectrum.
Mm-hmm. No, I think this is already an incredibly good start. And so when we think about vertical integration, and we start at the beginning, right? So let's talk about DTC, direct to consumer. So this, in theory, as you mentioned, you have full control, right? You can do everything. So how would you see DTC compared to Amazon if you kind of like look at both?
So you can control everything except where people shop. So that's the problem. I think if every manufacturer had the choice, they would go DTC because, you know, leaving aside some economics issues, but if you can manage the fulfillment, you know, the biggest thing about DTC is you control the data. You own all, you don't even control it, you own all the data. Even in a post GDPR world, you having that incredibly rich insight into how people are navigating your product choices, how people are, you know, what parts of your website people are bouncing off of very quickly. So that portion of your portfolio is not resonating. You know, where people, you can get people into a CRM system. You can do all of these other things. And that's the really big difference between DTC and Amazon. And within Amazon, for sure, you know, there's certainly more of an audience. So people, when they're shopping, if I'm in the market for a water bottle, odds are I'm going to start on a place that sells a lot of water bottles. So that might be Amazon. It might also be, you know, Sports Direct in the UK, for example. But Amazon is increasingly becoming more and more of that thing. And that's the big advantage. When you're trying to scale, you can scale a little bit faster on Amazon. Now, the last thing I would say is DTC means you can control the experience. So you want to personalize a product. You want to offer, you know, engraving services, for example, on jewelry. All of those things you can't really do on Amazon. And then the other really big advantage to DTC over Amazon, in my opinion, is I think Amazon has a lot of amazing things. It is horrible for merchandising. It's just not a place where you can talk about, you know, the emotional aspect of why people buy. You know, if you're a makeup brand, for example, you are reduced to your functional specifications, right? And that's just not that exciting. Yes, Amazon's doing more with enhanced A+ pages and with brand stores and this and that. But on a DTC side, you can literally have, you know, your face, take a picture through your laptop camera or through your phone and try different kinds of creams and so on. And, you know, then you can order things and they'll remind you when to replenish them and so on and so forth. And that's a really amazing experience as a consumer. On Amazon has a lot of things. Experiential e-commerce is not one of them. So, but Amazon has scale. I mean, there's not you could put together all the DTC sites and it'd still be smaller than Amazon.
Yeah, I think that's already a fantastic fantastic point, which I think addresses one of the questions which we already got in. So I think we have a question here from Kelly. First of all, Kelly says that my audio is better than last time. Thank you. Yeah, really tried to get a better mic. So very happy that it works. But then there was a follow-up question, which basically is, what would you say is a healthy mix between marketplaces like Amazon and DTC channels like Shopify?
So, I mean, I'd love to say that the answer is something like 62% or something, but yeah. I unfortunately can't give a number. I think that there's two things you should think about when you're making this decision. I think number one, you should think about what category you are and how that category is shopped. If you're in a category like makeup, there's a genuine benefit to going DTC and being able to offer a different experience and so on and so forth. But if you're in a category like computer accessories, well, the reality is that most people aren't going to buy that on Amazon. And are you really going to be able to deliver a truly better experience by going to computercable.com or whatever, right? So that's one thing you should think about is your category. You should also think about your consumer. So, you know, what would be kind of the best consumer experience? And then the third thing is how necessary is it for you to get data? And are you set up to do something with that data? One of the biggest advantages of something like Shopify is, you know, you get control of your data. If you don't have the infrastructure to do anything with it, then it's useless to you, right? If you don't have a CRM system, if you don't have GA360 on your site or something, you know, that would be the reason not to go for it. And I think there's a follow-up question which is related. Don't a lot of DTC have been pulling away from Amazon? If so, why is that? Control of the data, control of the experience. Once you get big enough, actually that starts to make a meaningful difference. What I will say is it's not either or. I don't think you should turn one off. I think the real answer, except in very, very few categories, so like jewelry, for example, I really struggle to see why a jewelry business would be on Amazon, quite frankly. Quite frankly, I struggle to see why computer accessories, somebody that's selling HDMI cables should not be on Amazon. But in the main, I don't think you can, it's either or. I think it's a mix of the two, but you should make that decision based on what category you were in, and does that lead you to give a better experience to the consumer? And do you have the infrastructure to have control of the data? The other thing is with switching your DTC to a landing page just to track and collect the data, then redirect to Amazon. Once somebody goes to Amazon, they're gone. You have no control of it. You can see that they clicked, but that's about it. Then it goes into the black hole. And I think there are some people who want to believe that Amazon will share that data with you. It's not going to happen. Amazon makes too much money selling you a DSP that they're just not, it's just not going to happen. They don't do it for the largest brands in the world, right? The LGs, the Samsung, the P&Gs, that redirecting people to Amazon is a decent way to get some sort of volume going if it works. But what are you optimizing against? Optimizing against clicks is not really meaningful. So I think that's probably one thing that, unless there's a very good reason to, I would advise people to not do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I think data is a very big point. So really thinking about, yes, you're of course losing a certain amount of control as soon as you kind of like move into the marketplace world. And of course, if you kind of like have your own shop, you can basically own much more of the user journey. But if you don't use it, right, or if you don't kind of like make use of it, then this probably is not really worth the effort. At least from a data perspective, right? There are a couple of other perspectives. But before we jump into some other related topics, let's probably go a little bit deeper into what you referred to in terms of, let's say, the full social world, right? Which also kind of like is changing a lot and which is emerging a lot, and which also, I think for some of you that probably also read the news last week, when Facebook also announced that they kind of like want to go a little bit deeper into the e-commerce space and kind of like, also play a bigger role there. So what would you say is the role of any social channel in any e-commerce channel strategy?
Yeah, I think that social commerce is one to watch. I think I've said for 5 years now that the only company that could challenge Amazon is Facebook. It's not Walmart. But I think that the thing about social commerce that's really interesting is that it's a full spectrum. So you have that control over pricing and so on. You don't have ownership of the data, but you have control and access to it. And I think that's an important distinction, because if you wanted to target people and understand a little bit more about what they do, it's much easier than to try to extract any of that data from Amazon. I think the other thing about Facebook that's really interesting is that social platforms are the channels in which people live now. That's where we consume. It's where a lot of product discovery happens as well. So I think your ability to actually proactively talk to a consumer is a little bit higher in a social environment than someplace like Amazon, which is very goal-seek based. We know that most people, when they come onto Amazon, immediately perform a search. So actually, if you want something that's not quite that functional, then social commerce, I think, presents a really interesting aspect. The other thing about social that I think is fascinating, and whoever cracks this is going to become a multimillionaire, is the use of influencers as affiliates. I think that there's something really interesting there, because when I talk to some of the largest brands that I work with, they are all saying, influencers drives a lot of brand love for us, and a lot, especially amongst younger consumers who don't traditionally respond to things like TV or print advertising. But they're also saying that e-commerce is where we're seeing a lot of growth. So I think that they're asking for those two things are going to come together. And I think that influencers will play an important role in the amplification of social commerce. The other thing that I think about social commerce that's interesting is your ability to get insights. So I think there's that. I'm not saying Facebook is perfect, far from it. Facebook has major problems, but I think that it is, it's one of those, the main difference between Facebook, and when I say Facebook, I also mean Snap and Pinterest and YouTube and other social channels, is those are businesses built to sell advertising. Amazon is a business built to sell product. And that's a huge difference, because that changes completely the way in which they will talk to you about control of data and ownership of it. Facebook will go out of its way to change the user experience on the app because it believes it can serve a better advertising experience. Amazon's not going to do that. Amazon will not change things if it believes that it sacrifices the retail element of it. I mean, that's one of the issues why the homepage of Amazon has not changed that much in many years. Tom, there's quite a few questions. Do you want
to... No, I just see this as well. So I'm just checking. Yeah, I think we kind of like will try to cover questions during the session. So let's kind of like look into some of these. So I have here a next question from Jess. Jess is asking, what's your opinion about online where to buy option on web direct to marketplaces like Amazon?
I think it's a good happy medium. I think it's a good way to drive more traffic to your product pages without necessarily investing in Amazon advertising. It's a nice happy medium. I think that brands can really make that work. I think that it's something that you should definitely test. Now, not knowing kind of what category it is, it's a little hard to say. I've seen it work brilliantly. I've also seen it not work. So I think it's something you've got to try. I think it's got to be done in a way that's not an offensive consumer experience. But I think the ability to bring in real-time pricing, real-time availability, all of those things into digital media when I'm reading an article on, The Guardian or something, is really quite wonderful. I think the CPM cost is low enough that you could actually justify testing that. And by the way, Amazon advertising isn't cheap. So actually, you should definitely test it. I think this is something that 3 or 4 years ago was falling out of fashion, and I thought that the where to buy business was going to kind of go away. But I think it's come back in a way, and I think especially when I look at the US, for example, the US is the market where the Amazon is the most advanced. US is also the market where Amazon has a very viable competitor. Walmart is not, you can't ignore Walmart in the US, right? So they have a credible competitor in a way that a credible competitor to Amazon doesn't exist in, say, Italy. So I think that the where to buy things is, and the thing is that it's, it doesn't require a lot of creative production. So it's something that brands should absolutely be trying.
Mm-hmm. Okay, no, I think this is, I think a very exciting space to watch out for. And Jamie is asking, again, related back to the data area, how do you feel about Amazon attribution? What sort of data do you get? Are there any downsides?
I think that this is, I'm assuming this is related to search attribution. So I think the issue is they've chosen to define it as 14-day post-click. And you kind of get it. You don't really have the ability to do very much with it. So I think that it's difficult to comment on something without knowing how it can be changed. Now, what I think is really interesting, there's actually some work we're doing with a client in coffee, instant coffee. And what they've been doing is they are a very heavy TV advertiser. Now, what we've done with them is we've actually done an attribution model which looks at the impact of TV on their Amazon behavior. And so what we found is there's a 3-day lag. After they do a big TV burst, 3 days later, their Amazon sales pick up. So now what we've started to do is actually, if the big TV push ends on Sunday, we kind of let it be a little bit quiet on Monday, Tuesday, but come Wednesday, we are there. So I think the thing is you've got to think about it in a more holistic way by looking at things in that nature. And an attribution model really only works for your business. I think Amazon search attribution is fine. Is it amazing? No. One of the biggest problems is that there's no linkage between search and display. So Amazon's attribution work is not the best by any stretch of imagination, but there's little point in debating it because they're not going to change it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think which also brings us to, I will kind of like continue with some of the other questions in a second, but just touching on a related topic. So, we talk about the importance of channels. We realize that the data piece is very important. Attribution also plays a role here. And one of the big, let's say, buzzwords in the last few years has also been omni-channel. So really the connection between different channels and not thinking about channels as separate channels, but rather really seeing the synergies between them and among them. So how would you think about this? Would you really say that there are very strong synergies? And if someone thinks about a multi-channel strategy, that they always should rather think of an omni-channel strategy, so everything can work with each other?
Yes, I mean, I do think that omni-channel is absolutely the way to think about it. It's fine to have a major channel and a minor channel, but I think the idea that a channel exists in isolation is a ridiculous idea. I mean, leaving aside that TV example, you know, one of the things that we notice, so Google, for example, is effectively a meta search engine, right? And one of the main data sources that feed into Google is Amazon. So if you're actually improving your positioning within Amazon, then as a result, that will improve your position within Google. So for example, if you're in, I don't know, coffee, and if for category generic term coffee, you start to rank as the #1 product within Amazon. When someone does a search for coffee on Google, one of the main sources of data that Google will plug into is Amazon. And so as a result, one of the first links that'll come up is your PDP on Amazon. So that starts to link up a little bit, and then that starts to open up a really interesting question about what is good SEO on Google look like. Do we want people to go to your brand website or actually to Amazon, which will be a seamless purchase experience because they've got their payment information and Prime membership and all of those other things. So I think there's that aspect of it. I think there's also the fact that Amazon absolutely does price comparison. So if you are in a heavily promotional category and you're on promotion with this one today and that one tomorrow and that one the day after, you're effectively on promotion with Amazon the entire time. So I think from a pricing standpoint, that's an important thing to consider as well. Also, let's not forget the 3P marketplace, right? So if you're selling your product on a heavy promotion, people will stockpile it and then resell it under a different name, right? Through an unauthorized reseller of your product. So it's just important to think about all of those things, you know, how, and omni-channel is not just the multiple channels that exist within media or the multiple channels of retail, but also multiple channels of supply. If you have supply going haywire, your product's going to show up eventually for sale on Amazon. And that if you don't have an idea of why that's happening, it's all absolutely interlinked.
Fascinating. Yeah, no, totally. I think it's, you know, for anyone that has worked in the general, let's say, advertising industry or all distribution, retail space, things just getting more complex, right? And if you really want to do one thing right, you really need to think about all the implications of the other areas. And in such an interconnected world, there's so many effects, right? Which I think are great. And we had last week, actually, we had a deep dive into Amazon and Google. And we also talked about how both can actually leverage each other. And as you say, I think there's a fantastic example of that. If you're successful in one, you probably also will be successful in the other, right? Which also means the opposite. If you're not successful in one, right, this can obviously have a huge influence on the other one.
Yeah, I'd say if you're successful on one, it's easier to be successful on the other.
Yeah, exactly.
Can't take these things for granted, Thomas.
No, totally not. I think we also have seen this with the questions last week, right? So that these are definitely two different worlds, or still perceived to be. We have another question from Glenn, which is about, I think, profitability. So we kind of like, we'll talk about this in a second. But before this, we have, I think, a follow-up question on what you mentioned around jewelry not being a great, let's say, category on Amazon. So what would be the context for that assessment?
Yeah, I mean, I've worked with some of the largest jewelry brands in the world. And so, look, it's one person's opinion. My perception of the category dynamics of jewelry is, number one, it's a very heavily considered purchase. Number two, there are some really great value-added things you can do. So engraving the jewelry, including a note card, including the gift wrapping or whatever. All of those things are not very easy to do on Amazon. The final fulfillment experience, you know, do you really want your final jewelry? If I'm buying my wife jewelry, which has not happened and will not happen in this economy, but you don't want it to appear in the same brown box that, you know, that your baby wipes and your vacuum cleaner bags arrive in, right? There's an element of the final packaging. The best jewelry packaging is actually quite unique and distinctive. The other thing also is that there's an emotional element to that purchase. Jewelry is not a functional product. It's actually a very stupid product, right? Because it's precious metal that is that you buy at a very heavy margin. So it's very difficult to build an emotive experience on Amazon. That said, there are some brands that do it successfully, but I find that luxury brands and jewelry brands in particular don't do it very well. Bernard Arnault, the CEO of LVMH, said earlier in the year that LVMH products will never be sold on Amazon. Look, that might change, but that's his position as of this year at least. So that's why I think that jewelry is, you know, it's also very difficult to represent jewelry in the images that Amazon allows you to have, because I think some of the jewelry websites that are doing it really well with DTC, there's an AR component to it. There's the ability to include a ring sizer, things of that nature, which is just challenging to do. It's much more experiential than buying toothpaste.
Yeah, absolutely. I think also what Baptiste, answered also in the chat goes exactly into this direction. I think if you have products, as you say, where the brand plays a huge role, where it's very emotional, and where you really kind of like want to get the message across, then a marketplace like Amazon is just relatively limited. We will talk a little bit about stuff like, the brand stores and sponsor brands, but still compared to the possibilities that if you have a luxury brand, what you can do with your own real shop, there's just a huge difference.
The last thing I'll add, which is not specific to jewelry, but actually CRM. Jewelry is a business where you make a lot of money when people come back and buy from you repeatedly. One-off purchases don't really work. So if you are also in a different category like fashion, where you make a lot of money when people buy from you repeatedly, it's very difficult to build a CRM strategy on Amazon. And that is one of the other things. So if you're not in jewelry, but you're in one of those other categories where repeat purchasing matters, flowers. Flowers is a category, leaving aside the logistics issues, flowers is a category that relies on repeat purchasing. And so that's the kind of category that would be a disaster on Amazon. And Molly, I see your message. I think my partner will watch this with this episode. So maybe not jewelry, but I'll buy some flowers.
Great. Yeah, and I think that's a great point. And I also think, yeah, if we think about categories, and I think you touched on this, Mudit, right? So it also not just depends on the category, it depends on, where in this category you are based, right? So you kind of like more the luxury space. Do you really kind of like try to sell it via scale? Do you try to make money with cross-selling? I think all of this plays a huge factor. So we have another question from Anas, who's asking, how has been your experience running sponsored products campaigns at scale? Are there alternatives? What would be needed from an e-commerce platform for you to adopt it?
I think sponsored products is great. I'm sorry.
Why do you think that?
I think sponsored products is great because it's just a great consumer experience to be able to find the product immediately. It's also a great business experience. You are not selling all your products at the same time, right? Like because it's summer, you're selling your summer range or whatever it is. I think the ability to deliver a very, very specific and a very unique experience. So if I'm searching for, red socks, cashmere, men's large, I can literally target that string with the product that matches that at best. And I think that being able to make it really specific is wonderful and fantastic. I also think that when you try to scale it, obviously using a bid manager is not even up for debate. I sometimes have this conversation, and I've actually started now saying to people, if you're not willing to use a bid manager, I can't discuss this with you, because to try to do things in the Amazon UI manually is a terrible idea. I think that the sponsored products piece is limited because of obviously how much you can target, because you're limited by keywords. But I think that there's more that's happening around things like product display ads. So I think that it'll start to scale up there. That said, if you're in a category with very limited demand on Amazon, it will always be challenged. In terms of alternatives, yes, there's quite a few. So Critio's retail network, what used to be called HookLogic, was a very credible alternative. What I've seen is that quite a few retailers are starting to go away and build their own. So I think that in the US, for example, Walmart has their own search program. So does Target. There's quite a few other ones. The other thing that also is important to keep in mind is, depending on the market you're looking at, Google has has partnerships with a few retailers around their product listing ads or Google Shopping. So in the US, that's with Target, where you can run a Google Shopping ad that drives someone to a Target product detail page. The last thing I'll say is the Facebook collaborative ads program is, I think, brilliant. And I think it's going to scale very quickly in Europe. What it is you can actually run Facebook media to drive people to your product detail page, but it works when the retailer has integrated with Facebook. So Lazada in Southeast Asia is one of the largest integrations, but there's quite a few. I can't remember now off the top of my head which one's in Europe, but there's quite a few retailers around the world that have integrated with Facebook and collaborative ads. So that allows you to do all the targeting capabilities and all the scale capabilities that Facebook has without relying on intent-based search. But I think sponsored products is a foundational layer for success on Amazon.
Mm-hmm. Great. Yeah, and I think also just echoing what you mentioned, what it in terms of automated bidding, right, and bidding algorithms. So also just the Annas, if you're thinking about solutions to really scale this and to really grow this, we will have some special sessions in the next coming weeks. Actually, one already next week, which I will touch on at the end of the session, which will really go deep into what you really can do around sponsored products. So obviously stay tuned for this, but as you say, it's a foundational strategy to really drive traffic. Chong is asking actually a question which I also find quite interesting, and also a question which sometimes gets a little bit, out of sight when we have these thoughts and discussions. And it's due to the coronavirus pandemic. Do you believe that many sellers that are in the B2B space will now use Alibaba as the new selling platform to focus on B2B sales in the US and Europe?
Oh, that's an interesting one. Yes and no. I think what will happen is that we will see more emergence of some vertical marketplaces, so something like Etsy or not on the high street will, I think, become a bigger deal. I think Amazon Business is going to really start to become a proper, meaningful offering. But I think that, depending on the product, if you're selling, I don't know, shoes or socks in bulk, yes, I do think that some of that will come. I got to be honest. I think that a lot of the B2B players are already on these platforms. They're on all the platforms. Once you get a bit of nice middleware to get your products listed and some feed management onto the platforms, I mean, they would be on there. I think the issue with the consumer standpoint is that Alibaba or AliExpress doesn't have that same level of consumer uptake within any European market. Quite frankly. Now, unless Alibaba were to go make an acquisition of some sort, that would change things. But I think at this point in time, to gain a huge consumer audience, it doesn't exist on Alibaba in the US and in Europe. It really only exists in
I just think, is it just me? Oh, no, yeah, you were just quickly for 2 seconds off. Now you're back.
Sorry,
Yeah,
did I miss
yeah.
something?
No, you were just, I think for 5 seconds, there was a lag.
Sorry.
Yeah. Good. So yeah, I think then this, I think, is on the Alibaba piece. So yeah, I think it really something to watch out for. And then we have a question here from Sasha. And Sasha asked the question within the Q&A. So this question is probably more relevant for larger blue chip companies with notable brand equity. Great question, I think, here. But how do you answer the question around Amazon creating competitive products on the back of the data? A brand is essentially handing over due to selling on Amazon. Amazon's products are often cheaper and priorities. It's quite as obvious for the Alexa product recommendations. What do you think about this?
I mean, I think it's the legal but not the ethical thing to do. That's my personal opinion. That said, private label has existed in some capacity for many years. So I think that there is that aspect of it. I do think it's a little shady though. So I think it's fine if they treat it like fair play. Tesco has private label, but you see the Tesco brand right next to the Unilever brand or the Reckitt Benckiser brand. Where I think Amazon starts to get a little shady is when they start to, try to intercept the purchase journey. So, there was that famous screenshot a couple of years ago of Energizer batteries with the Amazon thing pushing down. There is no way that a brand can bid into it. And I think that isn't cool, right? At least make it a fair playing ground. I don't think Amazon private label is going to go away, but I don't think I don't know. It rubs me the wrong way is all I'll say. Because I think that if they were to do it, which they're obviously entitled to do whatever they want. But I think it's a fair playing ground if you make the same tools available to your competitors as to your products. But That's my personal opinion. I think it's, doing it the way they've done it is a little
Yeah.
bit. What do you?
Yeah,
You know
yeah,
what?
no, yeah. No, I think it's definitely. I think there are many opinions, and also I think a couple of things also have moved and changed in that area. I think the last few years. But I think there's a follow-up question from Baptiste on this. Does the Amazon private label benefit at all in terms of ranking, just because it's branded Amazon?
If you look purely algorithmically, I don't think so. But they give so many other choices to, uh, you know, within the search engine's results page. Within the search results page, they will sometimes create an additional unit. I mean, I've seen this in the U.S. For some categories that it's not something that is accessible, so they don't actually have to really benefit algorithmically because they do so many things to stack the deck in their own favor that it automatically starts to benefit them. They automatically start getting so many page views, and that benefits the algorithm. So I think that from a consumer standpoint, does a consumer want to buy Happy Belly snacks because it's branded Amazon, or wickedly prime chips, or whatever? I don't know. I don't know if the Amazon equity extends in that way. Um, I mean, I think that Amazon Basics is probably the only one that's got some equity to it now in terms of like peripherals and so on. I do think that Amazon is stacking the deck, but I don't think it's the algorithm that's favoring it. But I think Amazon is kind of force fitting it. I mean, there's been a few examples that are very obvious. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think also as such as also following up on this, right? So if you do a voice query with Alexa, sometimes I won't even mention non-Amazon products. I think I think it's a complex topic, right? I think it really depends on the specific products. I think it depends on many factors, as you say, right? I think it's in the end, I think what Amazon always tries to do, and I think we touched on this, I think also in some of the last episodes when we talked a little bit about, speculating how the algorithm makes decisions. But in the end, it really tries to come up with the best product for any search query, right? And this then kind of depends on many, many, many factors.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think Alexa is an amazing consumer experience. I have three Alexas in my house.
Three. In this room?
Not one in this room because I
Okay.
stay Alexa a lot and it would just keep going crazy. Uh, I've thought of buying a fourth Alexa, by the way. So I do love Alexa, but I think that it's a wonderful piece of consumer technology. Is it the thing that's going to grow any brand's business by 1%? I don't think so.
Cool. Then, so another topic which we also had many pre-questions from various in the community, and which I definitely want to touch on today, is the full topic of profitability, right? So I think we talked a lot about data, about synergies, about omni-channel, about how things can work with each other. But what we just haven't gone too deep enough yet into is the full question of where do I make the most money? So,
Yeah.
so what kind of would be your assessment here?
Well, I think the first thing is let's get into the definition of profitability for you and profitability for Amazon, because unfortunately you have to care about both. Because if you have a profitability problem, and this really kind of applies only to vendors, but if you have a profitability problem with Amazon, they will delist. You have to keep an eye on net PPM. Which is absolutely critical to understanding where you stand. Because if you're not profitable to Amazon, they will absolutely kick you out of the retail side of things. I think that from a manufacturer standpoint, you also have to look at your own profitability, right? So once you kind of give up a little bit control of price, that starts to change things. But the ways in which you can kind of influence profitability also is like things like reducing return rates. If you change your product in such a way that it's damaged less often. I think one of the things we've seen quite a few times is pumps tend to come undone when they're being shipped. So moving from a press release pump to a different kind of pump is one thing brands can do. Shipping in your own container is something that you can also do to improve your profitability position. And I think also just understanding more the issues with some of your products literally on a nascent by nascent level. I think that it's very easy to sell your product in a way that Amazon makes money and you don't. So it's very important to get ahead of that a little bit and really calculate all of those things in your margin and price considerations. Another thing that I think that, especially in Europe, where we can lose the plot with profitability, is when Amazon starts operating pan-European picking. So if you have the same business that's selling in all EU5 countries, and your Spain team wants to make its numbers and decides to go do a huge promotion in Spain, and your Italy team doesn't, you will very often find that that Spain product is showing up in Italy, sometimes through marketplaces, and sometimes because for Amazon, it's easier to pick the Spanish product and fulfill in Italy. And so, now think about that 5 times. So if week 1 Spain's on sale, week 2 Italy's on sale, week 3 Germany's on sale, week 4 France is on sale, you've been on sale all 4 weeks for all 4 markets. So I think that keeping all of those things in mind and for profitability is really important. Supporting key Amazon initiatives. So, if you're looking at things like Prime Day and so on, it is a huge hit to the margin. There's no denying it. So it's really about the long game in those things. I think it's important to think about what are the things that will be profitable to you today and what are the things that will be profitable to you in 6 months' time. The awareness boost and the volume boost you might get from a one-off thing like a Prime Day might be worth it. But that's only if you have that 6-month view. If you're trying to make money on Prime Day with one-day sales, it's challenging. I think that packaging and fulfillment is often something that is, because it's not sexy, people don't want to worry about it. It is so important to get all of those things right with Amazon. And I think also funding the right kind of Amazon trade programs and so on starts to really get into it. But I think when you think about profitability, think about your profitability and the profitability of Amazon. As much as you have don't do it out of the goodness of your heart, but if you're unprofitable to Amazon, they will start to basically delist you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And in that context, what do you think about buy box monitoring?
I think if you're not monitoring buy box, stop selling on Amazon. I'm sorry, but you then kind of don't know what the final product is. I think everybody should have a buy box target on what they're trying to do, but it's also so important to know who you're losing the buy box to. So then either you're identifying, if you're a seller, you can identify competitors, but equally, if you're a vendor, you can figure out where leakage is happening in your supply chain. Because if you're losing the buy box to the same people over and over, then you've obviously got an issue where one of your sellers is becoming a distributor. So keeping an eye on buy box is absolutely critical. It does not cease to surprise me, especially in the bigger brands, how few people have a really clear view on what they're going to do to win the buy box. Excuse me, and why that's so important.
Perfect. All right. I see we have another couple of questions, and also we just want to keep in the interest of time. So let's quickly touch on them. So we had one question that asked about Shopify and the fulfillment network of Shopify, if this could be a threat to Amazon. And we have the answer of Chong, where I pretty much asked the question, do they have even a fulfillment network? And, so lots of engaging discussions in the chat. So do you have any direct thoughts on this?
I mean, I think never discount Amazon. Amazon has deep pockets. I think that I haven't really delved into the details of Shopify's fulfillment network, but there are other options, right? They've always existed. DHL has existed for, 100 years, I think, or something like that. So there are other options that are out there. I think that the Shopify fulfillment network has some advantages, but equally, they don't have the scale of Amazon. They certainly don't offer something like Vendor Flex, which is really quite important for some very large manufacturers. So I think that a viable alternative is always a good thing to have in a market. I'm a firm believer in supplier diversity, but is it a threat to Amazon? It's not an existential threat to Amazon. It's not going to be the thing that'll kill Amazon. It might temporarily reduce a little bit of their business or slightly slow down their growth, but I don't think anything's a threat to Amazon, except the government.
Except the government, yeah.
Except regulations, nothing is a threat to Amazon.
No, I think at least not in the short term, right? As always, Jeff says, one day Amazon will be bankrupt.
Yeah.
But the day can happen very, very, very far away. So we have many new questions. We have just a few minutes left. So let me just ensure that we can cover most of these. So Piotr is asking, what would you say is actually the most profitable channel? If anyone could just double down on one channel, where would you think people can make the most profit?
It depends on your category. I can't answer that in a general way. There are clients that make money hand over fist on Amazon, and there are clients that lose money hand over fist on Amazon. And actually, it's a huge distraction and annoying, and really DTC is much better for them. I think the reality is you have to make multiple bets and see what works for your business and your category and your consumer. Incidentally, I have seen clients in the same category that superficially look like they're identical businesses. For one, Amazon is enormous. For the other one, it's tiny compared to their e-retail business. So it's really hard to do that. And I think, again, Baptiste is saying that, you know, what is the, you have to look at the cost of fulfillment and your cost to serve. You know, what is the long-term chance that you're going to be able to win on this channel? It's all of those things are important. I don't think there's a one-size-fits-all.
Mm-hmm. Great. Yeah, unfortunately, right? I think we all sometimes would love to have like very clear and simple answers, right? But, you know, the truth is it really depends on many, many factors. And I think, you know, Kelly also, thanks, Kelly, for raising the question again. You know, we haven't forgotten the question, so it's good that you are, however, still raising it. And what Kelly was asking was, Amazon wants you to spend money. So will the social channels eventually want you to spend money on their PPC? With that in mind, which is more effective in terms of visibility and more cost effective in general?
I think the social stuff is so early that it's hard to it's hard to know what it's going to look like. However, I think that Amazon is more effective in terms of visibility. The consumer is already in an active buying mode. I know this is not a popular thing to say, but I don't think sponsored products is optional. I think you've got to do it. Now, I think in terms of cost effectiveness, you really should be protecting your brand terms, right? The things that are going to really help you win. Where it starts to get really hairy and can get very costly is when you get into generics. Now, that's where it starts to get a little bit like you can spend a lot of money going down the wrong rabbit hole. And that's where I think that, you know, that's where I think social might be more cost effective because you can do more kinds of audience targeting. I don't think the social channel platforms are going to have a PPC type thing. I think it'll be a CPC, yes. But it won't look like sort of search based, basically. That said, I think that test and learn, really the answer is. But I will say this, you would have to convince me for hours and hours and hours to change my opinion that you should be always on to protect your brand on Amazon with sponsored products.
Yeah, I think that's a very, very strong and clear statement. And it also basically backs up, I think, what we talked about in the last STL sessions when we compared sponsored brands, sponsored products to other platforms like Google, or also kind of like going more upper funnel DSP. I think the clear answer was always do sponsored products first, do it right, and then kind of like, you know, start to think about expanding. Great. Then I think we have, so I hope, Kelly, that this addressed the question. And we have Baptiste, who seems to kind of like really, really appreciate your know-how and knowledge, Moritz. Absolutely. So I think, you know, is there any platform where people can get in touch with you?
Well, LinkedIn is probably the easiest, but otherwise I think we will, Thomas, you correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that some contact information for Wavemaker will be included when the recording goes up or whatever that looks like. So visit our website and then you'll be directed to the right person. But yeah, I mean, you can always send me a message on LinkedIn.
Great, cool. Thank you so much for it. And I see we have a couple of other questions, but I also know that we are pretty much out of time. So for any remaining questions, we also will, as always, ensure to come back to you and ensure to really address those also then in the follow-up. But, you know, as the last minutes are now starting, I also don't want to steal too much of your time with it. First of all, I want to give a big thank you to you for your time, for your expertise. I think this has been incredibly insightful. You know, an hour passes by so quickly, right? So we always can just touch on a few topics, right? I think we could talk about many of these the full day, right? But I still hope that we could address some of the bigger topics which are out there. I hope this also has been incredibly valuable to everyone who joined this show. Thanks for the feedback. I also see that some great feedback already coming in. And before we end the session today, a few things. I will first start now very quickly a survey to everyone who is right now in the Zoom meeting. So it should pop up for you right now. So you have a quick chance of 30 seconds, up to 60 seconds to quickly review the questions, to quickly give us some feedback. So one of the most important things for us within the Sellics Thursday Live team is to ensure that these sessions are as helpful as possible for you. And this is why the feedback is so important, right? So any feedback that you share to us, we really take it seriously. So if there are any topics that you want to have more deep dives into, if you have topics where you're not that interested, right, please always kind of like give us the feedback, give us the thoughts, and we'll ensure to really accommodate your needs. And this is also the reason why we had today Mudit here, because there were various also topics in the past that related to the multi-channel / omni-channel discussions. So we wanted to ensure that we actually can give it a proper focus on in one of the shows. And of course, there might be some other follow-up shows. So I see already many answers coming in. And if you also, of course, have any, let's say, not very kind of like, you know, survey related feedback, which you can express here, please also just give us some feedback directly in the chat, via email, on our social networks. And we always will try to reflect this in the upcoming shows. Just looking at the first results here, I'm very happy that we have, seems that most people were quite happy, which is good, makes me happy, makes me very happy, hopefully. And what did I say, it makes you happy as well. So I think it makes us at least happy. And yeah, we kind of like, will definitely go deep to this, but this is again going deeper into flowers and jewelry question.
Oh, I can't answer that out of my own personal safety. I will leave that one. I will leave that one for the next session.
Well, great. And yeah, I think also great feedback from all of you, right? So we'll take this feedback very seriously. This video will be recorded, right? So you can definitely also, if you just want to check out anything, again, watch it on our YouTube channel. And if you haven't been on our YouTube channel, please also follow there, because, you know, we'll post various videos in the future. There are also many of the past shows. We're trying all the time new formats just to really understand where we can add the most value. So please, you know, whatever you tell us, you can be ensured that we'll take this very seriously, and we'll try to ensure to improve everything as much as we can on an ongoing basis. And not just on YouTube, you can also follow us on everything else, right? So we talked a little bit about different social channels today. So of course, you can also find us on Facebook, you can find us on Instagram, you can find us on Twitter, and you can find us, of course, on LinkedIn, right? So wherever you really want to follow us, please do. And we'll post also the insights as much as we can. Last but not least, I really want to thank you again, Mudit. I think this has been an incredibly insightful session. It's great to have you here.
I'm happy to join. Thank you for asking me. It's been a fun chat.
And yes, also last but not least, thank you so much for the great partnership with Sellics. We really appreciate this. And to everyone, have a fantastic Tuesday wherever you are in the world. I'm in Berlin, Mudit is in London, but I know that many of you are around the world. So have a fantastic day wherever you are, and see you in one of the next shows.